The train wheezed like a dying beast as it pulled into the windswept station of Dead Horse Crossing. Snow was falling in lazy, heavy flakes, coating the platform and the few souls who bothered to meet the train that afternoon. Among them stood Cole McCraven, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a worn duster and silence. He hadn't written many letters. The woman stepping off this train had no idea what she was stepping into. Clara Mae Thompson stepped down carefully, clutching her worn carpetbag. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the conductor might hear it. She wasn't what anyone imagined when they pictured a bride. Not in this hard, lean country where women had to ride and haul water and mend fences. She was soft, full, with a face that always looked red from nerves. She saw him, the man she'd been writing to for 6 months, and her breath caught. His hat shadowed his eyes, but even from a distance she could tell there was no smile waiting for her. Cole looked like a man who had smiled once, maybe long ago, before the West took everything gentle from him. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked, voice deep as the mountains. "Yes, sir. Clara Mae Thompson. Though, well, soon to be Mrs. McCraven, I suppose." He nodded once, slow. "The wagon's over there." No handshake, no warmth, just the wind cutting between them. Clara's chest tightened, and she wished she'd turned back when she still could. On the ride to the ranch, the snow grew heavier. The world looked like it was being erased. Cole's little girl, Ellie, rode in the back, bundled in furs, silent, except for a few small sneezes. Clara turned once, offering her a nervous smile. The child didn't speak, only stared, her wide blue eyes curious and distant. They reached the ranch near dusk. The land was rough and wide, the kind that made a person feel small. The house, a simple 2-room cabin, sat lonely against the horizon. Clara stepped down from the wagon, her boots sinking into the snow. Her dress clung awkwardly, her breath clouding in front of her. This would be home now, if he'd truly let her stay. Inside, the heat from the stove hit her like a blessing. She removed her gloves and her hands trembled slightly. Cole hung his hat, then spoke without turning. "You'll find things plain here. I ain't got help, and I ain't looking for fancy." "Plain suits me fine," she said, her voice small. That night, she lay awake on a narrow cot near the stove, listening to the wind crawl around the walls. She thought of the letter he'd written, short to the point but kind. A man's got a daughter to raise, needs a woman's steadiness. She'd thought maybe there was a space for her in those words, but the silence that filled the cabin now said otherwise. A week later, Clara made her first trip into town with Cole and Ellie. She'd hoped maybe he'd soften, maybe he'd look at her without that quiet judgment in his eyes. But at the general store it happened. The doorbell jingled as they entered, bringing a blast of cold air and a wave of stares. People always looked. Not because she was new, newcomers came through all the time, but because of her size, her awkwardness, her way of standing too still when others moved easily. Mrs. Harlan, the storekeeper's wife, leaned close to another woman, whispering behind a gloved hand. Clara caught fragments. "Mail order. Desperate. Poor man." Cole's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Ellie stood near the candy barrel, looking up at Clara expectantly. Clara smiled faintly, pulled a penny from her purse, and offered it. "Go ahead, sweetheart, pick one." The girl's face lit up. The first real light Clara had seen in that cold house. She took a striped candy and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." Then Mrs. Harlan's boy, about 14, all freckles and cruelty, snickered loud enough for the store to hear. "Didn't know the rancher ordered himself 2 cows?" The laughter rippled through the room. Clara froze, her cheeks burning. Cole's hand balled into a fist. He turned slowly, voice low and dangerous. "Boy," he said, "best you take your mama and head outside before I forget your age." The store went quiet. The boy stammered, face pale. Clara kept her eyes down, trembling. As they left, Ellie reached for Clara's hand, small and soft. Just a child's kindness, but it broke something open inside her. Ellie looked up and said so softly Cole almost missed it. "She is pretty, Daddy." Cole blinked, as if the words hit harder than a gunshot. He looked at Clara then. Really, looked. And for the first time, there wasn't pity in his eyes. There was confusion. And maybe something else he hadn't let himself feel in years. 3 days later, the storm rolled in from the north. Fierce, biting, a blizzard that swallowed sound. The ranch disappeared under white. Cole was out with the cattle when it hit, leaving Clara and Ellie alone in the cabin. The roof creaked, the fire hissed, and the world outside howled like something wild. Clara kept the stove fed, checked the shutters, wrapped Ellie in blankets. She hummed softly, an old hymn her mother used to sing. Ellie crept closer, resting her head against Clara's arm. "Will he come back?" she whispered. "Your daddy's strong." "He'll come back," Clara said, even though her voice shook. Night fell. Still no sign of him. By morning, the snow was waist-deep. Clara bundled herself and stepped outside, face stinging. She followed the faint line of the fence until she saw a dark shape half buried near the creek. It was Cole, frozen, weak but alive. She dragged him back, one step at a time, her body screaming from effort. Inside, she stripped the ice from his clothes, covered him with blankets, pressed her hands to his skin to warm him. For hours, she stayed beside him, whispering prayers. When he woke, he saw her tears and realized she'd saved his life. "You should have stayed inside," he rasped. "And let you die out there?" she said. "Not a chance." For the first time, he smiled. Not wide, not easy, but real. "You're tougher than you look, Clara Mae." She laughed softly. "Most things worth keeping are." Spring came slow to Montana. The snow melted, revealing the scars of winter, broken fences, dead cattle, but also life beginning again. Cole walked stronger each day, and with each passing evening, something gentle grew between them. Laughter came easier. So did silence. One night, as they sat by the fire, Ellie fell asleep in Clara's lap. Cole looked at the sight. His daughter, safe, content, and his chest ached. "You know," he said quietly. "Folks in town said I was crazy to send for a wife. They said I didn't need one." Clara looked at him, her heart trembling. "Do you think they're right?" He shook his head. "No, I just didn't know what I was asking for until you came." Outside, the coyotes called to the moon. Inside, a man who thought he'd buried his heart began to find it again. Summer turned the land gold. The ranch was alive again. Laughter, chores, the smell of bread baking. Clara moved through it like she'd always belonged there. The people in town whispered still, but less now, because they saw how Cole looked at her. Because they saw how the little girl clung to her skirts, calling her mama. One afternoon, as they all rode into town for church, Mrs. Harlan and her boy stood by the porch again. He was older now, quieter. Clara nodded politely as they passed. Ellie, sitting on the wagon bench between her father and Clara, looked up proudly and said for all to hear, "She is pretty, Daddy." Cole looked down at Clara, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright, and he said simply, "Yes, sweetheart, she is." The crowd turned. No one laughed this time. Love, hard-earned and honest, had finally found its place in the Wild West.